Brian, last week we record basically the same time every late Tuesday morning, and this was something that I had on the lightning round last week. We're talking about 100 mile per hour or 160 kilometer per hour gusts in the mountains. This has happened before, but they're saying it wasn't this dry before, so this is a very kind of dangerous situation for California this week. A mere 25 minutes after I uttered those words, the fire near the Pacific Palisades started and was reported. This is the first clip of the news story that was out.
In the Pacific Palisades area, there's a brush fire. Right now, it looks like the LA Fire Department is telling us it's about 2 acres. Here's the rough location of it. It's 1190 North Piedra Mirada Drive. There's a neighborhood there, and there's actually a bunch of small schools nearby too. So there's a significant presence of firefighters on the scene. I'm sure we'll continue to update you. It's grown already by about 10 acres, and 40 mile per hour winds observed in this general area.
So residents fled in their cars. There's sort of an upper section to the Palisades that is only really accessible by one road, and it got clogged, and the embers were raining down on people. And reportedly, an official told them to flee for their lives, and they did. But it ended up blocking the road, and that was kind of the first images that came out of the Palisades fire. Many of those cars were pushed aside by firefighting bulldozers that just kind of cleared them out of the way, wrecking some of them, damaging many others, and some of them ended up burning anyway. I saw footage last night of many of them that burned because the embers, they get into the wheel well and start the rubber on fire. That's a common way that they start. So another fire in the Altadena area started in the evening, and in fact they recorded 160 kilometer per hour gust in that area during that event. That is 100 mile per hour, which is not what you want when it is bone dry and you have a wildfire. It is the worst possible situation. It was hopeless. Firefighting aircraft even had to be grounded.
It's one of those situations where we have a convergence of fire trucks, police officers. There are palm trees that are on fire, all covered in ash. There are flying embers, and we are in the thick of things, you could say.
The embers are what causes this problem. This is not a forest fire where the flames spread. It's the embers. The embers, in such bone dry conditions, they stay lit longer, and they can travel further. They were saying 1 to 2 miles, which is a long ways away from the fire, and you could see evidence of that quite easily.
Well, you talk about having sometimes like a fire break. Well, why don't they have a fire break where some of the trees are cleared away? But, when it's this windy, those embers, it just doesn't matter where you have a fire break. They just go for miles.
There was virtually nothing they could do. The reporter the next day didn't realize the extent of the damage to the Pacific Palisades. She asked an official when utility crews would be there restoring power and cable and internet lines, and this was the response of the official.
I don't want to sugarcoat this, and I don't want to make any false promises. The Palisades is a complete disaster zone. Everything is gone.
There's the occasional house still standing, but for the most part, it's like an atomic bomb went off.
The Pacific Palisades neighborhood in the west side region of Los Angeles, it's about 20 miles west of downtown LA, a quiet enclave where people didn't always lock their doors. There was a mixture of relatively affordable houses with the occasional gated mansions of people like Tom Hanks, Steven Spielberg, Martin Short, many other celebrities. It is arguably less pretentious than, say, Beverly Hills or Bel Air.
There were homes that wouldn't look out of place, Brian, in your neighborhood or even my neighborhood. They were very common homes, but then occasionally you had this gated mansion as you get into the ritzier areas. Many of them had a view of the Pacific Ocean. It was like an IMAX theater going up the hill. As you went up, you would be able to see over the neighbor's house closer to the ocean. So the Pacific Palisades is a place that struck me from an early age because of its name. The name Pacific Palisades comes from the term Palisades, a geological formation consisting of a series of cliff-like bluffs situated by a body of water, in this case, the Pacific Ocean. Now, I live in the prairies of Canada. You don't hear about neighborhoods of Los Angeles all the time, but sometimes you do, and that one struck me. So it was in my mind, and I'd remember hearing it since I was a kid occasionally. It's on a hillside that lowers down to the ocean. It's known for its seclusion, being a close-knit community with a small-town feel. There's lots of little businesses and restaurants, and everybody could just walk to them. As you know, I was once in the comedy game many years ago, and there was a short time at the end of the 90s when I found myself on national television with my career ascending, if you will, and people were starting to suggest that I move to Los Angeles, including people who would actually move to Los Angeles. So there was this thought of, might I have gone to Los Angeles? I never did, of course, but I have wondered. I looked into it. It would have taken a lawyer. I had won some awards, so I could have argued that I was a valuable person.
Yeah, they have a special designation for somebody of extraordinary talent or something like that as the way to get a green card sometimes.
Yeah, and I would have taken a lawyer, and I didn't have the money, not even close. But I've wondered ever since what that would have been like for me, of course. My son growing up was a geography nerd, and to this day, as an adult, he asked me, Dad, where would you live if you didn't live here? So I had to come up with an answer, and I started telling him the Pacific Palisades. And the reason I said that is because of a book I read that I'll get to in a moment. And when I traveled to California by car in 2018 with the family in tow, I chose one destination to check out for myself, and that was Pacific Palisades. I decided that's the first place we went. We had a hotel in Anaheim, not because we were going to Disneyland, but because that was a cheap hotel, and we traveled and drove and looked, and we went there. And in fact, I went to Martin Short's address. I decided he's a good guy. He's a Canadian. And because of his book, his excellent memoir that he released about 10 years ago or so, it's called, I Must Say, My Life as a Humble Comedy Legend. And I listened to the audiobook because there's performances on the audiobook and musical numbers and things like that. And I listened to it again this week. And he frequently talked about the Pacific Palisades very fondly. So I decided to go to his house. I knew he wasn't there because he summers in Ontario. He's got a lovely big cottage in Muskoka or somewhere in Ontario, and he always goes there. And he has celebrity parties and people coming there. And this is a clip from his audiobook. I find it heartbreaking to listen to because, like almost all homes there, Martin Short's is gone, according to The Wrap.
But by 1987, with a growing family, Nan and I had to make a decision on living in one place or the other, and we realized we were ready to put down roots in Southern California. Little Catherine and Oliver would have dual citizenship. I'm way too Canadian for them not to. But they, along with young Henry Short, who came along in 1989, would grow up in a pretty house that Nan and I found at the end of a quiet street in Pacific Palisades. It was the perfect house for us. Not ridiculously large or grand, the boys always shared the same bedroom, but airy and cozy, with a big living room anchored by a fireplace and an elegant curved staircase straight out of one of my favorite childhood sitcoms from the 1950s, Father Knows Best. The location was beautiful too, walking distance from the bluffs that overlooked the Pacific. The master bedroom opened onto a balcony where the water sparkled blue in the distance. We can't afford this, I thought every time I looked out at the ocean from my new bedroom. How could I possibly deserve this view? We bought the house on the basis of the income I was about to make from 2 pending movies. You can guess what happened next. Practically the second that Nancy and I signed the mortgage, one of the 2 movies, a David Lynch film with Steve Martin entitled One Saliva Bubble, fell through. I was in a panic. I anxiously said to Nan, what if we can't afford this place? What if we have to sell it? Well, I guess we'd move somewhere, she calmly replied. But that's not going to happen, Goofy. You know that. 27 years later, I'm still here. There are those who make a hobby of real estate, forever buying and flipping houses, getting bored with the residents after a year or 2. I'm totally different. Keep in mind I spent the first 20 years of my life in the same house. I like to make a house a home and stay put. Nancy too. So we did. I think this became part of the appeal of the family short as we settled into the Palisades. We were show folk with all the deviancy and egocentrism that such a description assumes, but we lived like a normal American nuclear family, or perhaps like a family on a long-running sitcom, going through the journey of life together on the same comfortingly familiar stage.
So his annual Christmas party was legendary. But anyway, Martin Short Street was the place I wanted to go, breathe the air and take it in. And I only spent a couple minutes there. I wasn't want to be creepy, but walked around a bit, drove around the neighborhood, and it was wonderful. It was everything and more than was promised, really.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the perfect clip to play because I think that there'll be a lot of people listening to the news and thinking, oh, boo-hoo, these rich millionaires in California had their houses burned down. But of course, they're actual human beings who live in a place, and sure, he can afford to rebuild somewhere. But, you know, it's like losing your house could be
Well, he's lost his
devastating.
memories. His wife passed away about 15 years ago. And, you know, the kids all grew up there. They have different houses. He's buying different houses for them. And he has, of course, his summer home. But, yeah, I mean, he'd be the one person who's a celebrity who would really care about losing their home there. And it was a modest home. It wasn't, you know, that spectacular.
So, yeah, according to his book, they had legendary Christmas parties every year, star-studded parties. Everybody sang and performed, including Spielberg. According to Short, no cameras allowed. 60 people crammed into his living room and dining room. It wasn't crazy big, which he sort of explained in the clip there. Sounds like not a crazy big house, short of being a mansion.
So why did this happen? Los Angeles is a desert, of course, but it does have a rainy season that always happens from October to basically spring. And this year, it did not happen.
To note is that this area had not received any measurable rainfall since April of last year. So basically for the last 9 months, this area has been dry. No rain of any kind. So the vegetation out there at the time the fire ignited was very, very dry, very critically dry for this time of year. That was the first thing. Then the day of the event, the area was under extremely strong Santa Ana wind event. In fact, probably one of the strongest Santa Ana wind events we've seen in the last several years. So because of that, we had wind gusts, very, very strong wind gusts, and along with those winds, a very dry atmosphere.
So Santa Ana winds are strong winds that blow from the mountains out to the ocean. Happens this time of year. What was different was it hasn't rained since April. Nary a bloody drop of precipitation since April. And last February, they had lots of rain, so everything, all the vegetation sprouted up and was thriving. And then you had months and months and months of drought and dry air when this event happened. With climate change, everything gets worse. You know, the winds get stronger, the air gets drier, it gets hotter, everything, the droughts last longer. They skip a year sometimes. The rainy season skips a year, as it did this year. So they really did not have a chance in these fires. So far, 24 people, as of recording this, are confirmed dead. Thousands and thousands of homes are gone. Some people, Brian, you might be surprised, didn't have insurance because of climate change. They are not insuring people out there. And you and I have a friend, Nicole, who works in the film industry in Toronto. She has a friend that she worked with on a program called 13 Area who lost their home, completely gone. So there's, you know, as far away as we are, we have a connection to a connection. We're not that far away. And of course, everyone in LA probably knows someone who's lost a home. State Farm, that's the major insurer in the United States, stopped insuring California new homes due to fire risk from climate change. They won't do it. 150,000 people were under mandatory evacuation orders on the weekend, and some had to walk away from uninsured homes. I can't imagine.
Yeah, so from The Guardian, thousands of homeowners denied normal coverage may have to depend instead on an emergency state insurance program that is costly and complicated to join and caps its payouts at $3 million per household, significantly less than the value of many affluent homes razed along with their contents to the ground this week. And I don't know if you know about this, and there's a weird property tax law in California where as long as you own your house, you pay the same property taxes.
Okay.
Yeah,
As
so
when
I
you,
have
when
a
you
rel-
bought it? Same.
when you bought it.
Really?
Yeah, your property tax doesn't go up.
Wow.
And it's one of the things that can make it affordable to live in California because, of course, it is a place with very expensive. But if you bought a house in the 70s or the 80s and you still live there, your property tax is the same. And I have relatives that live in California, and I learned it from them. So I have an uncle who bought a very expensive large house in Los Angeles. As near as I can tell, he's been paying the same property tax since the early 70s. So it's in many ways it's a tax loophole for the rich because
Well, the rich are always moving. Generally, no wonder Marty
yeah.
Short didn't sell his house. I mean, that would be another reason.
I guess that's the thing. But so yeah, as long as you own the house, you pay the same property tax. You are allowed to renovate, but you're not allowed to flatten it and start over again.
Okay.
So what people do in California, especially in these expensive neighborhoods, is they will flatten their house except for one wall. They'll leave one wall standing.
That does it?
And that does it. And you could build a completely new house around that, and it's considered a remodel rather than a tear down, and you keep your property tax the same law. So there is an issue with all of the houses lost in the fire as well, that they may lose this property tax protection. Now, I believe the governor said something about extending special circumstances, so maybe they will be protected. But that's another possibility, that since everyone has to rebuild, that their property tax could go up.
This is from Political. State Farm dropped nearly 70% of its policies in the Pacific Palisades neighborhood last year. And that's according to state filing more than any other zip code in the state. Now, most people in the Palisades most people in LA didn't think the Palisades were, a fire risk area. There was lots of fire risk areas, but the Pacific Palisades wasn't on that list.
Well,
but the insurance companies know. They know because it's their bottom line. So they may have known better than other people. They may not have been overreacting.
No, and I read something about there was special changes to insurance regulations in recent years because you're not normally allowed to raise people's insurance on a hunch that, things are going to turn bad. But because of climate change, they've had to change some of the rules. And so, better to jack up the rates than to cut people off entirely. But, because you're psychic, you knew about this before it happened because it's evidenced on our podcast last week. But had you gone so far as to think, maybe Pacific Palisades would burn down?
No. And I've been there, and I just did not see it. But since then, I've watched videos, dash cam videos. People drive through neighborhoods. Sometimes I like doing that in unusual places just to kill time, just to relax. Yeah. Well, it's very lush. There's a lot of vegetation there. It's practically like a jungle. People have grown a lot of things. Not all of those things burned, but, bushes next to houses, which we'll get into later, can be a problem, especially when it's very dry. I know you water these things, but it's hard to keep them dry. Anyway, this insurance fiasco forced more people into the FAIR program, FAIR, which originally created in the 60s to ensure riot-scarred Los Angeles neighborhoods, but has since found more demand in rural and suburban fire-prone areas. These areas that intermix with urban and wildlife areas. Later in the show, we're going to talk about why fire is the biggest threat of climate change. Fire in urban areas and what you can do to protect your home, if anything.
The Clean Energy Show